Alhamdulillah. Assalamu
Okay.
alaikum.
Walaikum salam. How are you doing?
I'm very well,
Just want to make
thank you.
sure you can see me okay.
I can see you and I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
Can you see me?
Yes. All right.
How are you?
Perfect. Alhamdulillah. Let me just I gotta let my cat in. He's scratching.
Okay,
I
no
won't
worries.
have any peace. Okay, come on.
Okay, so just whilst Dr. Nicole is getting ready, I will tag her so you can find out more about her page and the work that she's doing. But hopefully today will be a very high level overview into the work that she's doing in her podcast. Um, let's see. Licensed psychologist. I'll lead by that. She's a licensed psychologist, trauma expert, researcher, professor, licensed psychologist. Okay, that's in there. And I want to make sure that I save this IG live so we don't have to forget behind. It was actually 3 years ago that we did. I thought it was 2 years ago. It
I
was
know.
actually 3 years ago.
What's that?
August 2021. Time flies.
Time.
Yeah, time alive.
Time flies. Yeah,
I, I know
we
you've
was
done a lot of work since then, but I really enjoyed what we spoke about when we had the deeper feminine, and you was breaking down what is femininity and explaining some technical terms. So if you don't mind, obviously we'll talk about what you're doing, what you've been doing currently. But if you don't mind, I still might ask you those same questions if that's okay.
no problem. Oh, I love it.
Great. Great. Okay. Before we start, I usually ask the host to try and give a quick elevator pitch in terms of who they are and brief background in terms of their work, if you don't mind, and then we can delve into the topic of femininity secrets.
Okay, great. I'm so happy. And just everybody, we recorded a podcast episode with Brother Habib. It's coming out this Monday, and I'm super excited. So, my name is Dr. Nicole Monteiro. I'm a licensed psychologist, certified life coach. I really help women to thrive holistically in their lives, and a huge part of that is in their relationships. And I'm passionate about this because I have so much experience in different areas of mental health, but relationships is where I see women struggle the most because there's so much conflicting advice. And now we're veering into the tendency to kind of shun relationships. And I truly believe we thrive on relationships. We just need to relearn the art of healthy, fulfilling relationships, of course, with ourselves, with our God, whatever our religious or spiritual beliefs are, but also in our intimate and romantic relationships. So I'm a wife, I'm a mom. I have a bunch of, I could talk about my professional things, but I think those are the things that are so important to me. Being a part of a family, my family, is one of my greatest um, blessings, I'll say. It's not an accomplishment as far as something I did, but just to be able to nurture a family is a huge blessing, in addition to the other things that I do to help women to also tap into what they want for themselves.
Lovely. Well said. And your podcast, do you mind, since because it's going to lead into actually my first question, but do you mind giving a quick overview in terms of what your podcast is about, the secret formula of femininity?
Yeah. So I call it the secret. It's the secret formula
The
of
secret.
femininity because it's those secrets or those gems that used to be passed down generationally, that even though we're in an age of information and everything is on social media, we're still missing those secrets that help us to feel good as women and to help us in our relationships. And so I talk about all ranges of topics that center on women living their best lives and having their best relationships. I think they go hand in hand. So I'm on YouTube as well as all podcast platforms, and I think you'll really enjoy it. The secret formula of femininity.
The secret formula of femininity. Lovely. And again, just for might sound like a stupid question, but I think especially for the benefit of the men as well who may be listening, what is femininity, and if you can define that, and does that change from culture to culture, from woman to woman, in terms of what is femininity? What do you mean by femininity?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's simple, but it's hard, right? Because I think so many people are starting to talk about it. But femininity is the way I define it is it's an essence, it's a way of being that we get to um, exhibit or like manifest as women. Now, I do agree. So there's this idea of the complementary nature of feminine and masculine energies. And so I do believe that both genders have access to both feminine and masculine energy. There's ways that as women, we tap into more of a masculine energy, and as men, they may have aspects of feminine energy. But in general, feminine energy is a part of our being as women, and it's part of our uniqueness. And we know in Islam, we understand that men and women are different. They're both of equal value and worth, but they have different qualities. And so femininity is a core quality of us as women that has to do with some really powerful strengths that are more soft strengths, such as nurturance, empathy, the willingness to receive and be in a receptive mode, the ability to kind of see things holistically, like in general, a masculine energy is very focused and pointed and like targeted, and then a feminine energy can kind of step back and see the forest. And just think about how those two things they really complement each other. And so femininity is, for me, some of it is seen outwardly in terms of how you can sometimes look at a woman and say, oh, that's a feminine style of dress or whatever. But it's really about a way of being and a way of moving through the world. And yes, it does vary culturally. Of course, everything does, right? That's one of our blessings as humans. Like, there's no one thing, it varies. But I've been all over the world, and I can tell you, it's an essence you can pick up on. Even though it might look a little different, it's also like a level of confidence and being grounded in yourself as a woman that I think is like kind of the across the board similarity in femininity.
Correct. Lovely. And I picked up on something I love that word or that term, soft strength. Sounds like oxymoron, but it sounds great. What do you mean by soft strength? And also, because I was looking at your podcast and you had an episode called Softness in Resilience. Can you expand on what that means or how that entails or manifests itself in a relationship?
Yes. So, like, we're in the soft era, right? Like, if you look over social media, everyone is like soft girl era, soft life, or whatever. And I feel like I was telling a friend, like, I feel like this is my time because I've always been a person, I've never been a loud, boisterous, like, upfront person. I'm a very, like, I observe, but people will always say they feel very comfortable and connected to me. And it took me a while to understand that that was a strength, that not always being forceful. It's almost like water, right? Like, how I always take my daughter for her birthday to the beach, and we talk about when you get in the ocean, sometimes underneath that current you don't see it, but it can pull you. That's how strong it is. It's not always the thing that you see outwardly, right? So soft strength is what we have as feminine women, I believe, where we know how to influence, that's not always trying to force something. It's like a level of influence through how you communicate, through how you can connect with others, through your ability to balance and compromise, right? These are some of the qualities that to me like highlight soft strength. So when I was talking about soft resilience, a lot of us as women have been through so much when it comes to relationships and heartbreak and just like disappointment and all of these things. But your resilience comes from not getting bitter, but like leaning into the parts, your openness, right? You got to protect yourself, of course, but you don't ever want to get bitter. And so for me, like the softness is retaining that sweet essence of yourself, if that makes sense, right? Like, and these are things like I'm trying to describe it, but they're things that you understand when you're in their presence. because you know the difference between someone who's bitter, who's been through stuff, who's bitter, and who's been through stuff, but who's grateful and looking forward, or, you know, more still open despite the disappointment. So that's kind of like the soft, it's like how to influence versus how to force your way on people.
Right, right. No, powerful, powerful. Well said. And so I'm just thinking, because you mentioned about the bitterness and that some women may be experiencing or going through due to past relationships, or maybe what they've heard and things like that. Now, that's something that I've noticed is unfortunately quite common where people are like losing hope in relationships and marriage or men for that matter. And it works both ways for men and women. So, if, for example, for a woman who might feel bitter or have a lot of resentment towards men, if there was to come to, do you offer, is it like therapy? Is it coaching? Is it courses? How would you help a woman who's, who's very bitter and but she wants to embrace the soft life, soft strength and femininity? What, like, if you can give us an overview, what journey, or how would you coach her or therapy? What would you advise such a woman basically who's bitter and but still wants to connect and have a fulfilling relationship with a man?
Yeah. First, invite her to my coaching community, which is called the Boundaries to Bliss Society. So it's a community
On
of
to that.
women.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to plug that. Yeah, I was leading on that. I was waiting for you to plug that. So yeah, can you talk about the Boundaries to Bliss program? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a community of women who want to find fulfillment within their relationships, right? That's the thing. Every woman wants to kind of have that relationship. But really, when we get deep into it, it's about your relationship with yourself. And I was just telling a friend, like, I could see so many women bitter on social media, but they want a relationship. That is not the way to, like, you do not attract with bitterness, right? The old saying, honey versus vinegar, right? So, but I would validate a woman. So in my community, we talk about like where they feel like this bitterness has come from. We validate the fact that disappointment, hurt, traumas, these things have happened, but we really chart a path forward. I have a whole like framework and videos and a whole process to really get a person from acknowledging what happened to then taking the steps to put themselves out there or to attract the thing that they want, which is usually for the women I work with, a healthier relationship, either if they're in one or if they're trying to find one. Now, a lot of the women in my program are married. Some aren't, and some are. But even the ones who are married are finding ways to communicate, which gets the attention of their husband, which allows him to, she draws him in versus like this battle of nagging versus sick of him versus, this thing that happens. But even for the single sisters or the ones who are divorced or who have been through things, it's like, okay, we get to acknowledge why you're bitter. I would never dismiss someone's, experience or feelings, but it's then moving forward. How do you communicate? How do you take care of yourself? We have a few pillars. It's self-care and nurturance. It's communication, and it's embracing your feminine energy. And what I want to say about femininity or feminine energy is because a lot of people are talking about it now, sometimes it gets misrepresented. And then that makes a lot of women feel like, oh, I'm sick of hearing this. I don't want to hear this again. That is not the answer, ladies, right? Just because some people are misusing it, maybe it's the podcast bros or whoever, these misogynistic people, just because someone is misusing it doesn't take away from the real power of it in your life. To lean, most women are tired of being strong and independent. As much as they say it, I see as many posts like, I'm sick of this. So part of it is throwing out the part, what do they say? Throw out the, what is
Maybe the
it?
bathwater.
Yeah, but there's another one. Throw out the bones, keep the meat.
Oh,
Like
shit, yeah.
whatever doesn't, right? Like the parts that you're not connecting with, that people who are just saying it are saying it, but don't throw out the real power uh, of things like nurturing yourself, softer communication, learning how to be complementary with your spouse, learning how to actually become, I'm big on becoming the thing you want to attract. So you can't be bitter and then say you're looking for a good man. It just doesn't work. Or, you know, I'm talking to women, but if you were talking to men, you can't be online talking about these women or this and that and then expect to find a good woman. It just doesn't work. Energetically, as far as even algorithmically, what they're going to show you bitter stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But even people who are observing, no one wants to truly, no one who's in a healthy state wants to be with a bitter person. It's not to say you don't have a valid reason for being bitter, but part of your work is to like really, you got to move past it or you've got to move through it. Like that's just the reality.
Thank you. Thank you. And just for the benefit of those of you who have joined the last couple of minutes, I'm speaking to Dr. Nicole Monteiro, who is a trauma expert, a licensed psychologist from the United States of America. She's also an author, a researcher, a professor, well experienced. She's got a podcast called The Secret Formula of Femininity. So The Secret Formula of Femininity, which is available on YouTube. And she also has the Boundaries to Bliss online boot camp program and courses to help women, irrespective of whether they are married, single, divorced, helping them overcome issues in terms of like relationship issues. Yeah, so all of the information is on your website. Is that website I can signpost? Yeah.
Yeah, drnicolemontero.com or in the link in my bio.
Yeah. So please obviously follow her, go and check her out. She can obviously have the full information and link to her website to find out more about the work that she's doing. Like I said, she is an expert. She's trained, so she's a licensed psychologist. And actually, what is the difference between a licensed psychologist and a clinical psychologist? Because you're both, right?
I have a PhD in clinical psychology. Licensed psychologist means I'm licensed to actually provide therapeutic services. So it's more of like if you're a certified physician or something, but my degree is in clinical psychology. So you could be a licensed psychologist, but your degree is like in counseling psychology. It's just like little minor differences. So yeah, I've been trained to diagnose and work with severe mental illness and mental health problems. But you know, I've definitely expanded and kind of, I don't work so much with mental illness like that. I work more with people who are in a place of just trying to improve their lives.
So is that in the case of more like being a coach as opposed to being a therapist looking at the past? Is that correct?
Yes, so to speak, yes. I do see people in therapy. My therapy practice is actually full. So I do have people that I work through traumas and things like that, clients that I work with. But with coaching, it is more of a forward, like more strategies, specific goals around what you want within your relationship and techniques for overcoming trauma. And because I do group coaching, it allows me to work with more people. I also offer one-to-one boutique one-to-one coaching. It's a higher level of investment, but I do work with women like that. Some women want to just kind of work with me specifically, intensely one-to-one on their relationships. I have worked with people who've been married 30 years, 1 year, 10 years, and there's different challenges that they have at those different stages. And so they really want to work with me individually. And so I do offer that. But it's really focused, like we really dig in to what is happening in their relationships. I don't let them just say, oh, my husband's a mess, and then we just laugh and like we really get to it. What are the ways that you're not communicating? What are the things you're not asking for? How are you neglecting your own boundaries? All of those things, like we really help them to develop a new way of expressing themselves in their relationship.
MashaAllah. Just a couple of comments. Someone said, please record watching from the Gambia, but my connection keeps breaking. Yes, so God willing, inshallah, I will be saving this IG Live and I'm going to upload it to both YouTube and it'll be saved on my page. So yeah, I definitely will. I'll make sure I save this IG live, and then another person said, I'm assuming this is addressed to yourself. Don't shortchange yourself, Doctor. It is an accomplishment and honor. So you've got a big fan.
Thank you. No,
Okay.
and that's a great point. Yeah, I don't. Yes, we should never shortchange ourselves.
Well, that's good. No, that's good. Great. Um, there's a question I want, and we did speak about this on the previous. Okay, so actually, someone actually asked a question I will quickly ask before getting to my next question. Can there be softness with anger? Can there be softness with
Love
anger?
that. I love that question. Yes.
Mm.
Anger is a core emotion. Anger is a normal emotion. And actually, we tend to get bitter when we hold a lot of resentment. And sometimes we have resentment when we don't when we don't acknowledge and express emotions like anger and sadness and so forth. So, absolutely, I am not at all talking about suppressing emotions. But what I am saying is sometimes what happens with anger is sometimes, number one, there's another layer underneath, which is sadness. This happens a lot with men, but also with women, where it's almost more acceptable to ourselves to express the anger because the sadness makes us feel too vulnerable. So sometimes we need to dig a little deeper because is there actually sadness underneath that anger? But number two, sometimes with anger, we tend to associate it with like being explosive. Some people just, when they get mad, they just go to 10. That is not healthy, not just for people you're interacting with, but for yourself. So the key to anger is, first of all, just acknowledging it and being curious about like, why are you angry? And sometimes you just simply need validation for that, right? But you don't need to, yes, the hard part comes, you get hard and bitter when you have anger that either you don't really acknowledge, you don't validate, or you don't find some support. Like if you need to talk through it, or you need to journal it, or you just need to tell the person, like, I'm angry, I'm upset that this happened, right? If you need to assert your boundaries. So 100% anger is not bad. I'll break it down how I tell my kids, like, you get to be angry. Actually, people who are never angry, that kind of concerns me because I'm wondering what they're actually suppressing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm always a bit wary of someone who appears to be like too perfect or like always smiling and everything is great. Or when I hear people talking about like, yeah, in my relationship or my marriage, I've never had any issues or never had any conflicts or arguments over like 15 years, 20 years. I'm just like, really? I mean, I don't know what is that Disney that you're trying to like. I'm not impressed by that because not that I want people to talk about their problems, but we're human beings. There's going to be issues. There's going to be like conflicts. It's a case of how you resolve those conflicts, not giving this impression that because you are compatible or you're equally yoked that there'll be no issues whatsoever. It's really you learn more from when there are issues and how you resolve them. So yeah, I do agree with that sentiment. I did have a question. I know we spoke about this a few years ago, but if you don't mind, if you can talk about it again, since obviously you're an expert in this. What is narcissism? And is it possible for someone who is untrained, or maybe they've just watched a couple of podcasts or they've been in a bad relationship, to diagnose maybe like a ex-partner or current partner as a narcissist? Because this is a word that is often bandied about quite frequently. So if you can first define what is narcissism and how is someone diagnosed as a narcissist?
Yeah, that is a great question because it is running rampant, even more so since we talked. So, from a clinical diagnosis perspective, there is something called narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. That is a personality disorder is sort of like a pattern of relating to people, of seeing yourself, of relating to the world. It's pretty pervasive. So, it's not just one behavior and, oh, he has narcissistic personality disorder. But in general, narcissism is sort of like a trait where there's a continuum. So there's the diagnosis part, and people who aren't trained, it's not helpful to go around diagnosing people. If you notice, the people who are actually trained to diagnose, we don't sit on the internet and look at people and say, he's a narcissist, because we don't really know that person. But just what it is, it's a way of viewing people as objects in terms of what you can get from them, how you can exploit them, how they can make you feel better about yourself, and how you can use them for your own needs without reciprocating. So it can involve a lot of sort of an elevated view of yourself. That's when we say grandiose, like you think so highly of yourself that you don't see your flaws, and you use that to either downplay other people or to exploit them, charm them, get them to make you feel better about yourself while you're either not doing anything for them or you're making them feel badly about yourself. And it is very difficult to be in a relationship with a narcissist. Some people have grown up with narcissistic parents, or what we might say is emotionally immature. They only cared about themselves. They only were nice to the child in public when it would make them look good. And then in private, it's like you can be abusive and emotionally just downgrade them. But in public, as long as the image looks good, right? So narcissists are very concerned with their image, with using other people to uplift their sense of self, or how their image and how they feel about themselves, and with being very manipulative, using tactics, sort of push-pull tactics, to when they sense that a person is trying to break away from them, try to pull them back with things like charm, compliments, love bombing, things like that. But then once they get the person, it's like back to that cycle of degrading them, abusing them, discarding them. So they really tend to see people as objects to meet their own emotional, psychological, or image needs, if that makes sense. Now, here's the thing. Narcissism also, just in a less like benign, in a more benign or less harmful way, is like a self-centeredness. Now, we are in an age that promotes traits of narcissism. Think about it. The selfie, right? It's focused on the self. The whole idea of narcissism comes from Greek mythology, and the idea of Narcissus, who was looking in a river or in water and seeing their own image reflected back. So it's this idea of like being enamored with yourself. That is, so there's the diagnosis, the personality disorder, which is pretty severe and extreme. And there's not a lot of people that meet that criteria for narcissistic personality disorder. It's not, I can't even really say I've diagnosed it that much myself. But there are traits that all of us actually, on a continuum. Now, some of those traits might be more severe and extreme, and some is just like a kind of a self-centeredness. There's two sides of narcissism. One side is the part that's like has a sense of superiority, but then there's another part where a person actually feels inferior, and they're doing these things to, right, like overcompensate. So all of us actually at some time might display some aspects of narcissism. Fewer people are actually diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. And just because your relationship did not work out, just because somebody was a jerk, just because you guys didn't understand each other, just because he cheated, that does not mean he was a narcissist or had narcissistic personality disorder. And I'm so glad you asked that, because this armchair diagnosis is like getting out of control.
No, I'm glad you said that. I'm going to clip that. So I'm going to send that around as well to a number of people, because I just think it's important to understand. And I like how you'd explained the difference between the narcissistic personality disorder, which again is not as common as many people think. And then there's many people, if not most of us, have narcissistic traits. And I do think where people might see certain traits and they'll just assume that the person is a actual narcissist. And I'm always I'm glad you said it the way you said and explained it and broke it down as someone who's an expert, because like I said, I think that term is thrown around a bit too easily. And yes, yeah. So what advice then would you give to people who maybe have had a difficult relationship and they've seen narcissistic traits in their partner, previous partner? Should they still continue using that term, or maybe just be more correct and say narcissistic traits, or maybe avoid that term and use another term? Like what advice would you give to people who feel that their partner or ex-partner is a narcissist?
Yeah, I would say, it's helpful when you get out of something to kind of look back on it and understand it for what it was. So if it helps you to stop self-blame, then you can say I was with a person who had some narcissistic traits. I think the more important thing besides the label is just to acknowledge that there were things that happened in the relationship that you don't, when I say don't internalize it, like if somebody was abusive to you or somebody was cheating or doing things that weren't right, you need to say, they made horrible choices that are not my fault. Right. I think that's what people are trying to say when they're like, he was a narcissist or she was a narcissist. But we tend to say actually more for men is what I'm seeing, but but the trait can be in women and men. But I think people tend to want to have that label as a way to help them understand what took place in that relationship. So I think the better thing to do is just to step back and take stock. Like, okay, what parts, if they made you feel bad, if anybody has made you feel bad about yourself, is making your self-esteem go lower, making you feel like you're not beautiful, you're not good enough, you're not worthy. You need to separate that and say that that was what that person did. That doesn't reflect me, right? So I don't think you have to call someone a narcissist to be able to do that. Because sometimes what's happening is people are saying because the relationship didn't work out, that person was a narcissist. And I think that doesn't help you go forward. Now, one of the areas where I see it happening is like when there's a divorce and there's children involved, and there it can get very contentious. Even psychologists, we don't all like to deal with custody cases. It's very intense. And so in those cases, a lot of narcissistic traits can come out. It doesn't, again, mean that the person has a diagnosis of that, but it's a lot of content, it's very like tense. And so a lot of narcissistic traits can come out where it's like you tend to feel like the other person is your enemy. And that happens a lot. But I think the more helpful thing is to just take time to reflect back on your relationship. And if there were things that a person did that made you feel unworthy, not good enough, lowered your self esteem, the key is to not take that as your truth. And say, that person made choices that did not support this relationship, and I'm separating myself from it. But I think my problem with the whole narcissist things, it absolves any the person saying it of any responsibility. Like, oh, how many narcissists, like everybody's like, oh, he was a narcissist, she was a narcissist. That's completely, it's it's bullshit because not everybody has this diagnosis. Maybe they had avoidant attachment styles, and so they pulled away, and it made you feel like you were inadequate, and it caused miscommunication. Like it could be so many reasons why a relationship broke down, but the key is to learn to separate yourself from things another person may have tried to make you feel about yourself, whether they did it intentionally or not.
Um, I've got one more thing that I think you missed that I can add if you don't mind. The person can join Dr. Nicole Montero's Boundaries to Bliss course or boot camp to understand about narcissism and their relationship. And so that's another thing that I think maybe you didn't say, but I think also
Thank you.
that
Yes,
would
I try to give it all right then and yeah. Yes,
that would definitely be
exactly.
helpful. When you would
And
acknowledge, like you said, validate, help them communicate, go through self-care. No, honestly, what I'm saying, I'm not trying to be facetious or anything, but I think it's important because a lot of people, like you mentioned, do have this armchair diagnosis, and diagnose people based on their maybe personal experiences, and sometimes they might need a professional expert like yourself, not necessarily to question, but to help them understand that what they're going through, yes, it's valid, and to ensure obviously that they feel that they're not at blame or at fault of what's happened, but to be labeling someone or mislabeling someone, I don't necessarily think that's quite help. I don't think that's helpful. So, yeah, your boundaries to bliss. Sorry, is it still a 30-day boot camp? Because I remember when we spoke a few years ago, I think it was 30 days. Is it?
Yeah, it's the society now because it's like an ongoing community. The boot camp, I found that like the boot camp was too short and women needed ongoing support. And so I have women that like we get to work through like, okay, well, what happens if you try to be soft one day and it quote doesn't work? So I found that like women need a community to be able to continue to try out these techniques, get feedback, get encouragement. Because what happens is they'll try it one time and say, it didn't work. See, I'm going back to my old way. Like, no, that's not how this works. It takes time. Or see, his narcissism is coming out. It's like, no, sis, nope, we're not going to go there. We're not going to revert to labeling as a way for you to not like keep doing the work.
Mm-hmm. And someone asked a question, I think it's linked to the boot camp. Is it an interactive community?
Very interactive. We have twice monthly live calls with me where I answer questions. We do role plays. And then I have a whole library of recorded courses, and then there's a community for interaction. And then whenever I do an event, it's like we're an insider group. We have our t-shirts, you get discounts on any retreats and other challenges and workshops that I do.
Lovely. And there is another
Mm-hmm.
question. I don't know if we'll have time to answer it because it's kind of linked to what you answered before about the anger point, or we can signpost that to your the boundaries to bliss or to your podcast. But the person's asked, I just want to acknowledge their question. What are the best ways to express anger when you are not supported in a state of anger, upset? That's a deep question. Maybe book a consultation call with yourself. I think that's probably because I don't want to, because we've still got a few questions and I want to stay on topic.
And stop me anytime. Yeah, you come to the community, and that's the thing. Like, there's no one easy solution. Like, I can give you I can list some things, but in the community, we look specifically at your situation.
Lovely. Okay, just for the benefit of those of you who are joining, or joined recently, or the last few minutes, I'm speaking to Dr. Nicole Monteiro, who is a licensed psychologist. She's also a therapist, a trauma expert, a researcher, a professor. She's based in the United States of America. She's a global traveler, so she traveled all over the world. She's also the host of a podcast called The Secret Formula of Femininity, which is available on YouTube. So The Secret Formula of Femininity, as well as an online interactive community for women, helping women, whether they're single, divorced, married, and what have you, navigate their relationships. And that is called the Boundaries of Bliss. Is it Boundaries of Bliss?
Boundaries to Bliss. So
sorry, Boundaries to Bliss. Boundaries to Bliss. Yes, Boundaries to Bliss. And we had a really good conversation about narcissism and what it is to be a narcissist. And again, I will save this because someone else has asked me, can I make sure, I think people might be upset that I didn't save the previous one. So I'll make sure, God willing, I will save this and upload this to YouTube with Dr. Nicole's links to her website. Obviously, those of you who are listening now, you can check out Dr. Nicole's IG page and follow her and find out more about her courses. And do you also do like retreats or like events?
I actually have a retreat coming up next week here in Philadelphia, and then I'm doing an international one most likely in Costa Rica. So if you sign up for my email list or follow me, you'll get those. But yeah, we focus on all kind of holistic techniques and communication techniques, relaxation, food, all of that.
So the retreat you have next week, is that sold out?
No, there's still a few seats. The early bird pricing tickets are gone, but you can still reach me. It's November 2nd, so it's literally like 8 days away. If you're interested, send me a DM and I can give you all the details. You can still come. I make them very intimate. And so the feedback has always been like, I felt seen, I felt heard, I was fed, I was cared for, and women leave feeling really rejuvenated. So it's the Boundaries to Bliss live experience. So that's my retreat. You can still get your tickets.
The Boundaries to Bliss is next week in Philadelphia, and the one in Costa Rica, what is that? Do you mind giving a quick overview in terms of what that retreat's about?
So it's the same sort of topics, but in a more, I know women want to get away as well, and they want to immerse themselves in the beauty of the world. And so this is going to be a 3 day experience where not only do we work on helping you develop these skills, the communication, the self-care, the nurturance, but we have fun. I have a lot of like surprise things, like we do bead making, we do henna, we do dance parties, and it's a chance to get away. When I do the 1 day retreats, people are like, I wish this were longer. So that's, I don't have the dates yet. Most likely it's going to be in April or May of 2025. But the best way is to like follow my page, get on my email list. And I always do early bird tickets. So as soon as I get the date, people who follow me will get access to early bird pricing. But that's going to be a 3 day experience, food, fun, workshops, and a chance to relax and rejuvenate. And those are the things, like for me, when I think about femininity, and like I've been all over the world, like it's when women come together and they support having fun with each other, self-care, beautifying each other. These are the things, not sitting around complaining and talking about what some man did. Like it's really about pouring into ourselves and beautifying ourselves and having fun. Not always, there's the serious stuff, right? I'm a scholar, so I'm always going to want to teach, but there's also the fun and the relaxation that a lot of women actually don't, I find they don't get a chance to have in their day-to-day lives. So
Mm.
that's what that's about.
Um, why do you think, this applies to both men and women, but I'm just interested to hear your thoughts in relation to women. Um, and you could also answer for men as well, to be fair. But why do you think people like to bash the opposite sex? Like men will get together and like kind of complain about women, and not all women, but sometimes women like to get together, especially if they're like you mentioned, bitter or resentful or being in a bad relationship, and bash men, and their friends will also kind of maybe support that, even if they're even in a good relationship. Why do you think? And men do that as well. So I'm not saying it just applies to women. Men do that as well. Why do you think? I've heard people talk about. I don't know if it's a clinical term like trauma. Is it trauma bonding or something? I'm
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
understand.
yeah. I totally agree. I think it comes down to even how our brains are wired. Like in a way, our brains are wired to hone in on negative information. And it's almost like it's a survival mechanism. Because if something negative happens, we need to remember it. If you just think about our evolution, right? Like we need to remember, where was that lion or where was that thing that was a danger to us, so that we don't repeat it. So in a way, like there's documentation that parts of our brain, the memory parts, light up when it's exposed to negative memories versus positive memories. They leave a stronger imprint. So that's where, when you're saying like the trauma bonding, or you hear phrases like misery loves company, in a way, we're kind of wired. It's a self-protection. But that doesn't mean, like, we have to also be aware, because it's so easy to get into groups are very, very powerful. And when you're in a group, they influence, it's like group think. So even if you think a little bit differently, when everybody else starts saying it, it's easier to just chime in and go along with that. Because then you're like, well, wait, if everybody else is saying this, then maybe my point is wrong. And so there's a level of it where we're wired for it. There's a level of it where it feels good, because part of it is like parts of our experience gets validated. Like, all right, we're all going to get together because we all have been through this. And then there's parts of it where it's hard to get out of it. Like mindset, when we say mindset, that is so real. It's effort to have a more positive mindset, or have a mindset that's a little bit different than what everybody else is saying. And so it's kind of just like a normal thing. But the problem is, with social media, we're exposed to so many groups and so many different things that people are saying, it can get confusing, and it can also get hard for us to try to see things differently. We just revert to like our own comfort zone. Like, all right, I'm just, everybody's talking negative. It feels normal, it's familiar. So some of us don't even know how negative that we actually are. But yeah, we tend to get together. And then there's differences. There's men are mysterious to women, women are mysterious to men. So there's that part, like when you don't understand something, you're just going to put your own negative spin on it. So there's parts of men that we don't understand. And we're like, well, if he's quiet, it must be because he has something to hide. Versus maybe men process things very differently. They don't always talk right away.
And if anyone has this, like it's a negative mindset, they're in this and they want to come out of it, what advice would you give such a like a woman in particular?
Community is key, right? Groups are influential. Join the Boundaries to Bliss Society.
Oh yeah, yeah, good, yeah, I was waiting for that. I
You're
gave you the
helping me.
alley
You're
oop.
helping me.
Yeah,
Yes.
I gave you the alley oop. Yeah, you dunked that well. Great.
Because you know what? You have to, we keep it real, but I don't, if you can ask any woman, they're like, she's so gentle. But wait, she told me about myself because I don't really indulge too much negativity because I know what it does to your brain. It's not helpful at all. It's not helpful for your current relationship or the one you're trying to get or your relationship with yourself. So you need to be with more positive people. There was even a study, a book I was reading called Self Love, and they were doing studies about some people have been raised in generations of negativity, like across the world. Like they don't think they can do anything. They were always down, therefore they down themselves. So you have to be intentional about being in a different group of people. And then, there's so many different techniques, but you have to like learn to reframe your thoughts. You could see this book as, wow, that's a little book. Or, wow, they made a compact book that could fit in my pocket so I could read it. Like you could see every situation differently. So you have to literally train your brain. Because I notice when people are like, they see everything negative. Oh, well, he didn't even ask me. And it's like, well, maybe he wanted to surprise you, right? Like you just got to think of different ways to think about a situation. And that will literally change how you feel about that situation. But you got to get in the community to learn all the techniques.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. You referred to the I didn't want to just, but I wanted to pick up on it because you referred to the avoidant attachment style. Can you mind giving an overview in terms of is it the four or how many attachment styles there are? What just so yeah, if you can educate us on that. 'Cause I know you mentioned the avoidant attachment style.
Yeah, people are really getting, there's this a lot of more research now. We've known for a while attachment is key from the beginning. When we're born, you attach, like, just the bonding, the hormones and so forth. But then we tend to develop a style of attachment based on our childhood experiences and different things. And so the research people tend to talk about three. There's a fourth one that isn't as common, but it's secure attachment. That's when you have a healthy sense of wanting to connect, but also being okay being separate. And it's healthy. You're not overly clingy, but you're able to be interdependent. Anxious attachment is when you feel very fragile. You fear abandonment, and so you're preoccupied with what you're in terms of relationships of what the other person is doing. You got it. They didn't call me back. They didn't read. They left me on red. Oh my God, you're thinking the worst because you're fearing rejection and abandonment. You really want to connect, but you're like overbearing. Avoidant is a style where you're a little more have mixed feelings about connection. It can feel like you're being suffocated or being too like, you know, encroached upon. Like you don't feel, you want your independence And your relationship, you need time to warm up and to really want to get close to somebody. The crazy thing is, anxious people and avoidant people tend sometimes to get together. So the person who's overly preoccupied, like with their partner responding to them, somehow will get with the person who's like, "Hey, like chill out. You're doing too much." And then that makes the anxious person feel more anxious. And then on the avoidance side, they tend to get with these anxious people that make them feel suffocated, and then they pull back. But then it becomes a push pull because they still want that person, but they're a little bit iffy on how to express it and how to connect. So, secure is a healthy balance. Anxious, you're too focused on not being abandoned and it makes you anxious about the other person. Avoidant, you're also nervous about um, relationships taking over your identity or being disappointed in relationships, but the way you deal with it is you pull back. You tend to avoid too much closeness. And then the fourth style is disorganized, and that's where people sometimes, if they grew up in a lot of chaos, it's just very, they look, these are the toxic relationships. If you look on social media, the people that are fighting and arguing, reality shows, and all of this craziness, that's usually they're seeking chaos unconsciously. So that's more of the disorganized. So they're secure. We want to go towards secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized.
And is it possible to change ones? I know you said that the attachment style generally develops from childhood. Is it possible from someone to go from anxious to secure or avoidant to secure, or even is that possible?
Yeah, you can rewrite the script. Yes,
And
it is
how
possible.
would and how could someone do that?
You need support, right? I mean, it's sometimes you are who you are. So part of rewriting the script is being self-aware
Yeah.
and being intentional about choosing. Oh, that's my phone thing. About choosing different reactions, and so but you need to get support with that. That again, the community, we talk about that a lot. A lot of the dynamics of the women is there with someone that has a different attachment style. And so we work through, like, once they understand that, behave differently,
Great.
understand the other person's behavior. And one of the key things in relationships is don't take it personal.
Do not
Personal,
do
please.
not take it personal, did you say?
Yes.
Okay. Can you expand? What do you mean by that?
Person, say if you're with someone that has an avoidant attachment style and they tend to retreat, especially if they're emotionally triggered, don't take it as like they don't like me. It's
Oh man.
just their style. That's who
Mm,
they, even if a person does you dirty, that's a choice they made. They cheated. That's their decision. That's their behavior. We got to stop taking on the burden of other people's behaviors or childhood issues or their scripts. It's hard enough to deal with our own. So
mm,
stop taking it, even though it was done to you personally. As usually people are just living out what they know versus trying to specifically do it to you.
mm. Yeah, actually, yeah, I heard that. I heard that. So why do you think people take like you said, so a decision that someone else made, especially for example, someone steps out in their relationship or their marriage, that's the other person made that decision. Why do so many people take that person as if they're responsible for a decision that another person made?
It's painful. That's one of the most, it's painful for men and women, but I'll just speak from this perspective. Um, it's extremely painful, and usually, again, how our brains are wired to interpret painful experiences, even from childhood. We If a kid's parents get divorced, like around especially age 4, 5, 6, 7, that child will internalize it as their fault. We tend to interpret things from our own perspective, like it must be something I did. And if you already had disappointments in relationships, again, from childhood, you're oriented to see it as, you're trying to give it context. Like, well, why would that person do that? And then you tend to turn it on yourself. And not that things that happen in a relationship don't, there's not a part that both people play, but at the same time, you have to understand everyone has choices to make. So if somebody was unhappy, they could have chosen a lot of things. They could have chosen to communicate. They could have chosen to say, hey, let's get some counseling or some advice or support. They could have chosen to, just restrain themselves. But then they chose to step out. That was a choice they made. So you have to be willing to look at it without taking on the burden of somebody's choice.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different things. Like somebody will say, because I see on your platform, a lot of people keep writing, I'm no longer attracted to my wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a common question. And no, I'm glad you're aware. That doesn't necessarily, people think it leads to one conclusion. Either you leave that person, or you get another wife, or you step out, or like those three conclusions. There's a lot of different choices. There's communication. There's getting a sex coach to work on it. There's, learning more about yourself and why, like a lot of the people that come on these, messages they send, they have porn addictions. There's learning to get rid of that. There's a lot of things you could do once you become aware of the problem, but we tend to think, yeah, like just because there's a problem doesn't mean that the choices a person made is your fault.
I agree with that. No, I agree with that. That's very, very well said. And I'm just going to read a couple more comments. So just for the benefit, if anyone has joined in love.
That's crazy. Yeah.
You can't see them, did you say?
Yeah, I can't. I don't know if I.
Yeah, I'll read the next. So I was just from Chantel Blake. So just a nice comment. I'm so glad to see you both in conversation. Allah accepts and raise your works. I mean, and you as well. That's a nice message. I'm used to getting abuse in my DM sometimes. That's why
You know, it's
sometimes maybe
crazy. I had a client one time that sent a a DM to you.
really.
And knew from the level of detail that I knew.
Okay.
And when I met with them, I said, did you put something anonymous with Brother Habib? And they said, yeah. I said, that's not the way to do it. Don't do that. If I can recognize it, imagine. And it was kind of disparaging. Like it wasn't just an innocent question. It gave way too much detail. I said, no, that's not. We're not going to do that. Okay. Because it wasn't, as in a lot of these questions, some of them are truly innocent, but some of them are also, it's throwing in jabs at their partner.
Yeah. What I like to do as well, and the reason I post, so I even when I get, obviously I'll ask the person's permission before posting anonymously, but just to hear different people's perspective on what I've, and this is similar to what you said, that a number of people, the advice that they will give is like maybe one or two choices, not realizing that there's sometimes multiple choices, or things that they can do. And that's why I think it's also important to realize the difference between people giving general advice and someone who's more trained and expert, and even making them see things differently. And then they realize that maybe their choices are more expanded than actually what they originally envisioned. So but yeah, so the next comment, but another nice comment. Oh, you're bringing the positive vibes, Dr. Nicole. But someone said, would love to have you host a wellness retreat in Puerto Rico. So that's maybe.
Yes. And I've been there like 4 times. I was doing these teacher workshops in Puerto Rico and San Juan, and I was there, I didn't host it, but I was teaching the teachers about mental health in their students. So I would, yes, send me a DM. I can't see the comment, but please send me a DM.
Do you and well, if you don't, I hope you are going to, or think about it. Do like some training for like religious leaders or like imams and stuff, because I'm just thinking of like a lot of terms that sometimes religious leaders or people on the imam, like on the khutbah, when they given talks, they will use like a lot of like clinical terms but without proper diagnosis. So then non-experts using, like things like addiction and all of these, and I find that quite problematic, especially if, you're not trained in that particular field, but you're diagnosing someone, misdiagnosing someone. I'm just wondering, it's like, even from what you've said this past hour that we've been talking, I'll definitely obviously will share it, but these are the type of things that I think people need to be educated on to know what your lane is. Like, there's not, because you might be community leads or even a relationship or marriage counselor, it doesn't mean that you are a trauma expert or mental health professional. You can diagnose, certain behaviors that someone has put to you. So I'm just wondering, is that something that you do or you're thinking of doing? Because I think there's a dire need for that. Because a lot of people, especially in religious communities, they'll reach out to like an imam or what have you on very complicated issues, and oftentimes they haven't had the training. So I'm just wondering, is that something that
I
you've
need
thought
to.
about
I
doing?
want to. I want to. I need to be a little less shy about that. I need to. I
Yeah, I
would
think
love
it's
to.
important.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's important. It's important because a lot of like imams and religious leaders I speak to, they say like 80 to 90% of the queries that they've received is in relation to relationship issues.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah.
not it's not how to pray or believe. It's not like history. So a lot, and then they become like pseudo counselors, but oftentimes, of course, they haven't had the level of training expertise like someone you would have had. So that's why I'm just thinking, like, to connect those dots where, okay, people might still go to them, but then they can signpost to people that are in the community that can give them the guidance, or they can kind of refer those individuals to. Um,
I did see even the one of your posts I was scrolling today where I think it's Nas. I forgot his name, the guy from India, and he was talking on rape, and I'm like, what in the world? Like
yeah,
saying that it's
that's
the
very
girl's
that's very
fault.
common. Yeah, that's like an example. That's my point. There's like where you have, and because a lot of people aren't able to differentiate between what the religion says and religion and certain interpretations, which there are many interpretations which are misogynistic and racist, and because oftentimes people aren't able to differentiate between the two because they hear a knowledgeable or so-called knowledgeable person saying something, they automatically assume that's what the religion says, and it's a big disconnect. So, like, obviously the post that you're referring to, which I posted earlier today, it's like I've heard that rhetoric so many times, and it's like some people either they're not aware of it or they just think that's just what the religion teaches. That if a woman is dressed a certain way, she deserves to be assaulted, and it's just like this is that type of thinking and reason is totally barbaric. But unfortunately, there's a number of people that have that mindset, and they're teaching and or like even like justification or reason saying the reason why the hijab was ordained is to prevent rape, and there's no mention of that in the Quran or the Hadith.
Because why
But
would
because people
rape,
aren't,
yeah,
but
be so rampant in
because people
places?
don't, yeah, because people maybe aren't aware of um, what the religion or the Quran actually says, they just take from that person because they're seen as an authority, and they don't question things. And because especially in certain religious circles, it's seen as you have to respect people of knowledge and things like that. So if they say something, they take it as gospel, even if it sounds absurd. Like, so that's like a statement that is very common in some parts of the world, even in parts of the Western world. But because now, obviously, with the internet and social media, you're hearing these views in one part of the world, and they're talking, making these wild generalizations, like in the West, this is what happened, and it's just like, from like even when I was in Egypt, people used to say, some of my teachers used to say some ridiculous thing. That one of my teachers said, "Oh, like in the West, everyone commits zina. It's so easy. All you need to do, if you see a woman, you go, you blow, and her clothes come off. Then she wants to sleep with you." And I'm just like,
And
but
then they're gonna come and be.
the majority of the class are not from the West, and there's a few people from the West, and some people are, just ignoring it or pretending that okay. But it's just, and oftentimes, even at the time I did a challenge, I just thought that's just ridiculous. But the problem is you have some people being trained that way, and then they have that mindset. Then they go into some of these countries, and then even when a woman is going to bring um, allegations or like something has happened, or they'll automatically dismiss it because they think, oh, that doesn't happen, or that's because the way
Yeah.
they're dressed. So there is a lot of unlearning and re-education that does need to be done as well for, like, I would say, like community leaders or religious leaders, because they're in positions of power, and a lot of people take what they're saying as everything what they're saying, or their interpretation is actually what the Quran and the Prophet, peace be upon him, said. So that's why, yeah, like the work that you're doing and things like that, I think it's important to obviously paid. Not, I'm not saying this like charity. They be paying for your
They'll
services,
send you
but
to the
you know, like having
poorhouse,
like a
right? Trying to help
yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I know you're concentrating on women, and you know, my Allah bless you for that. But I definitely think there are a number of, especially like I said, we spoke about this in the podcast. If you don't mind actually touching on this idea where sometimes women feel if a woman says something, it's okay, yeah, that's nice, but they need to hear a man validate what that woman said, even if she's an expert. Why do you think some women have that, like, like need to have a so-called male person validate what a woman has already said? Where does that come from?
I think it's socialization. It's kind of a lack of sometimes if they haven't seen or they associate leadership with a certain, again, in a very masculine way. But there's a long history of female leaders and feminine leadership. But I think they just associate authority with with gender, with male gender, and whether it's right or wrong. And like I've had so many women, even when I just say like men love feminine women, they'll argue and fight, and I'm like, what are you arguing about? And then those same people will come back and say, well, my husband said, or no, well, my brother said, and then they'll like be saying the same thing that I said, but now they believe it and they're spreading it because it was validated or told to them by a man. So it's like they haven't really accepted. I think people like that, they haven't truly accepted their femininity because then they would know it doesn't have to come from a man. We value, yes, we value both men and women, but it can also come from you as a woman, it can come from another woman. But it's just a vicious cycle of sometimes I have found sometimes the most combative and strong and independent women, they don't value other women, which is really odd to me because they're saying it as if I don't need a man, but like they don't truly value what other women have to say. And but I've seen it a lot. So, but I've seen the women who are more in touch with their femininity, they can accept it from whoever it comes from. It's about the value of the information, whether it's male or female.
Mhm. Agreed. Agreed. And can you also touch on, again, just for the benefit of those who have recently joined, femininity, obviously you defined it in the beginning of our conversation. What do you make of what they call, is it feminine coaches or feminine schools, but it's a very dainty, pink, that type of brand of femininity. Does that conform to your understanding of femininity, or is that a type of femininity? Because that's often what, like a Barbie, that kind of like when sometimes when people say that comes to people's mind. Is that the femininity that you're saying people should ascribe to, or is it more expansive? Can you understand that?
Be an aspect of it. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. See, other people will be like, I hate these feminine coaches. I'm like, hey, I don't have a problem with it. That's not the only thing. I would say everything always starts from the inside out. So my favorite phrase is, you can put lipstick on a pig, it's still going to be a pig. So you can dress dainty and do all that stuff, but if internally you're still harsh, you don't know how to receive, you're not able to listen well or communicate well. You see a lot of women dressed up, but you could just look and the aura is not feminine. So it's not only about the dress, but that is, I guess, my message sometimes is as women, we don't always have to be so serious. It can be, you can be fun and dainty, and that is attractive. Like if you nobody in a marriage is like saying, oh, I want my wife to just be drab and blah, right? Just like no woman is like, oh, I just want my husband to be sloppy and don't care. So it's okay to be outward attractiveness, whatever that looks like. It's okay to focus on that, but not only that. I would never sort of tell somebody to just be superficial, but there are women that I've worked with is it just was a little tweak we made, like, why don't you wear earrings? It's okay. lip gloss. It's okay to be in the house and wear beautiful colors. Like we do talk about those things sometimes, and it's totally okay, right? So there's nothing wrong with you don't only want to be surface, but I would never. So many people come to me and say like, I like you, but I hate these femininity coaches. I'm like, well, some women just want to learn a certain etiquette, and there's nothing wrong with that. A certain way of there's a science to a lot of that stuff, whether it's color psychology, how you utilize your tone of voice. Like some people want to learn those aspects of it. A problem with that.
Right, lovely. Before we wrap up, I've got two questions, but I won't ask it in one. The first one is, what is the secret formula of femininity? If you can actually answer that. And then the second part of the question is, from your podcast, The Secret Formula of Femininity, which of the episodes that you've released so far have you enjoyed the most and why? Of course, all of them are great, but which of them did you enjoy the most and why?
Okay, the secret formula of femininity is based of the value and the power of your feminine energy. That you don't have to be a man, you don't have to emulate men. There's a strength and a value that you have as a woman that includes the fun, frivolous stuff too. Like it's not all that's my one feedback sometimes to women is like sometimes we're so intense. And I could be that way too, right? But it's okay to lighten up a little bit. So the femininity is like being able to be in flow and different aspects of yourself. One of my favorite episodes, so the most popular actually was on boundaries. And I did a whole deep dive. It was like an hour episode, and people loved that one. But one of my favorite ones is on soft communication. And I always have a story either about myself or a client or something, I don't say their names, but just people I've worked with. And the comments I got on that were like, I made up a fictitious name for this person, Brenda, and like her harsh communication style that she didn't mean. And so many people were like, oh my God, I'm Brenda. I totally relate to this. I don't mean to be sharp and harsh, but it just comes out. And like they truly related to that. And I loved it because I always try to give some specific tips. Again, you need to get in the community to go deeper, but so many people responded that they felt like they could relate to that sense of a lot of times communicating in ways that they don't really want to, but that's just what they fall back on. And they know it's pushing away, it's causing problems in their relationship. So I love that episode. It's one of my favorites.
Okay, I'm definitely going to check that out, and obviously check. I advise people to check out obviously not only that episode but the rest of your episodes in your podcast. I'm conscious of time, and inshallah, I've been praying that it's gonna stay because we've gone over
Oh
the
my
hour.
gosh.
But inshallah, I will save this, inshallah, God willing. And like I said, I'll upload this on obviously on my page as well as on YouTube. But any closing thoughts, anything else that you need to promote, please. We spoke about the Boundaries to Bliss, the online course, and obviously everyone can find out full information on your website.
Yes, I hope you can hear me. It kind of broke up, but yes, please. First of all, if you're watching this on IG, follow me, DM me if you want details on the Boundaries to Bliss retreat, which is coming up on November 2nd, or if you want to be on the waiting list for the one in 2025 international retreat. Um, Subscribe to my YouTube channel. The link is in my bio, but also if you know that you can benefit from an interactive community, a supportive of community that will hold you accountable, but also support you in your relationship journey, your relationship with yourself, but also your romantic relationship, your marriage, send me a DM, and let's talk. Simplest way though, you go to the link in my bio, go to my sign up for my blog on my website. You'll get updates, you'll be on my email list. You can go through, I have so much content. You can go through my YouTube page, go through my blog, and start to just get a sense of some of the topics. I have a whole theme that I call Damsel Me, which is a way that we get to lean into our inner damsel. You've heard of damsel in distress? Well, we
Yeah.
flip it. We flip it. It's not that we're helpless, but it's like how to lean into that part where we get to receive. And it feels good, and the men in our lives want to do it for us. So subscribe to my YouTube, subscribe to my blog, send me a DM if you want specific information. And I would love to see many of you in the Boundaries to Bliss community where you get the support that you need.
Inshallah. Just exactly like that. And thank you very much, Dr. Nicole Monteiro. So again, please follow Dr. Nicole. Join up her interactive community, Boundaries to Bliss. I'm going to make sure, and also thank you everyone for listening in and the questions that I received. I want to save this because that's the only thing that's, like I said, been on my mind.
Oh my
So I
gosh,
don't want to
I'm
make the same
scared.
mistake. Yeah, so I'm going to save this now, inshallah. And again, yeah, we'll be in touch soon. But yeah, Jazakallah khairan again for everyone for attending, and thank you very much, Dr. Nicole, for your work, and keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate you. And yeah, may Allah bless you and your family, and yeah, keep up the good work. And please, like I said, if you have some time, try and do that. Open that space for some of the religious leaders to kind of educate them and to school them as well. Because I think we're in desperate need of that. But thank you. I'm going to say this
Inshallah.
now. Assalamu
Okay,
alaikum.
and everybody check out the interview with Brother
Oh
Habib
yes,
coming out on Monday on my
Monday.
YouTube
Yeah,
channel. Yeah.
I'll share that when that's launched. I'll share that on my page. Shukran. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.